What if your entire life was a lie built on a secret you wore around your neck every single day? For one struggling waitress, a tarnished silver locket was her only link to a mother she never knew. For one of the world's wealthiest women, that same locket was a ghost from a past she thought was buried forever. When these two worlds collide in the middle of a bustling diner, it won't be money or power that changes everything. It will be the shattering cry of a grandmother who just saw the impossible, a living memory of the daughter she lost 50 years ago. Stay with us as we unravel a story of heartbreak, betrayal, and a secret that will rewrite a billion-dollar legacy. The fluorescent lights of the Morning Glory diner hummed with a weary persistence, casting a pale, unforgiving glow on the cracked vinyl booths and the sticky laminate tables. It was the kind of light that exposed every flaw, every smudge on the silverware, every crack in a coffee mug. For Diana Reid, it was the light she lived under. At 24, she moved with an economy of motion, born from exhaustion, her feet aching in her worn-out sneakers as she navigated the narrow aisles between tables. She could pour a coffee, take an order, and clear a plate in a single fluid sequence, her mind a million miles away, usually calculating whether her tips would cover this month's rent on her tiny, drafty apartment. Around her neck, tucked beneath the collar of her faded pink uniform, rested her one and only treasure, a silver locket tarnished by time. It was oval-shaped, and etched onto its surface was the intricate image of a weeping willow, its long, delicate branches seeming to droop with a sorrow of their own. It had been her mother's. That's all she knew. Her mother, she'd been told, had died in a car accident just after she was born, leaving Diana to be raised in a series of indifferent foster homes. The locket was the only tangible piece of her past, the only proof that she came from someone somewhere. She'd tried to open it 1,000 times, but it was sealed shut, as if guarding a secret too painful to share. At a corner booth, bathed in the relative privacy of the diner's dimmest spot, sat Catherine Sterling. To the other patrons, she was just an impeccably dressed old woman with piercing blue eyes and an air of quiet sadness. They didn't see the chauffeur waiting outside in a black Bentley Mulsanne. They didn't know her name was synonymous with a global pharmaceutical empire, Sterling Corp., a name that appeared on Forbes lists and in the Wall Street Journal. They didn't know that her tailored Chanel suit cost more than the diner's entire monthly profit, or that the simple pearl earrings she wore were once owned by European royalty. Catherine came to the Morning Glory diner once a month. Her advisors hated it. Her security detail hated it. But for her it was a pilgrimage. It was gritty real, and a world away from the sterile boardrooms and silent mansions she inhabited. It reminded her of a time before the billions, a time of struggle and hope, a time before the great gaping wound had been carved into her life. She ordered the same thing every time, black coffee and a slice of apple pie she barely touched. Diana approached the table. "Can I get you anything else, ma'am?" she asked, her voice soft but tired. Catherine looked up from her coffee cup, her gaze distant. But as her eyes focused on Diana, they snagged on something, a glint of silver peeking out from the young woman's collar. Diana had leaned forward slightly to refill the water glass, and the locket had swung free. Time stopped for Catherine Sterling. The clatter of cutlery, the murmur of conversations, the hiss of the coffee machine, it all faded into a deafening silence. Her breath caught in her throat. Her perfectly manicured hand resting on the table began to tremble. It couldn't be. After all these years, it was a ghost, a mirage conjured by a grieving heart. The locket. The weeping willow. The specific unique etching of the branches, a custom design she had commissioned from a Parisian artisan for her daughter's 18th birthday. A one-of-a-kind piece, an heirloom meant to be passed down through generations that had ended before they'd even begun. "Where?" Catherine's voice was a choked whisper, barely audible. "Where did you get that?" Diana instinctively pulled back her hand, flying to her chest to cover the locket. The intensity in the old woman's eyes was startling, almost frightening. "It was my mother's," Diana said defensively. "It's all I have of her." The word mother struck Catherine like a physical blow. Her mind raced a chaotic storm of 50 years of repressed pain and unanswered questions. The police report, the fiery crash on that winding coastal highway, the closed casket funeral, the official story that her daughter Isabella and her infant granddaughter had been lost forever. A lie. It had to be a lie. Catherine's eyes, those sharp, executive eyes that could dissect a balance sheet in seconds, now scanned Diana's face, desperately. She saw the shape of her jaw, the slight curl of her dark hair, and the color of her eyes, a deep hazel just like his. The boy Isabella had run off with. The musician Catherine had deemed unworthy. The connection was so powerful, so immediate, it bypassed all logic. It was a primal scream from the deepest part of her soul. This waitress, this girl struggling to get by in a cheap diner, was not a stranger. Isabella. Catherine breathed the name, a ragged, painful sound torn from her lungs. Tears, hot and shocking, welled in her eyes, spilling down her carefully powdered cheeks and leaving streaks in their wake. Her composure, the ironclad shield she had worn for half a century, shattered into a million pieces. Her chest seized. The room began to spin, the pale fluorescent lights blurring into streaks. She reached a trembling hand across the table, not towards the locket, but towards Diana's face, as if to touch a phantom. "Granddaughter?" She gasped, her eyes rolling back in her head. And then, in the middle of the morning glory, Dinah, surrounded by the smell of grease and stale coffee, the billionaire magnate Catherine Sterling, collapsed, her body slumping forward onto the sticky tabletop in a dead faint. The last sound she made was a single heartbreaking sob that echoed the name of her long-lost daughter. Panic erupted around the corner booth. Diana, frozen for a second, in sheer shock, was jolted into action by the diner's owner, a burly man named Sal. "Call 911, he yelled, rushing over. But before Diana could even reach for her phone, the diner's front door flew open. A tall man in a dark suit, his face a mask of controlled alarm, strode in. This was David Chen, Catherine's driver head of security and most trusted confidant for the past 30 years. He had an ex-military bearing and an instinct for trouble. Seeing Mrs. Sterling slumped over the table was his worst nightmare realized. "Stand back, please," he commanded, his voice calm but absolute. He was by Catherine's side in an instant, checking her pulse and her breathing. "She's stable, she's fainted. No ambulance." He was already dialing a number on his own phone. "Dr. Matthews, prepare for an arrival. Code Azure." He and Sal carefully lifted Catherine, her frail body feeling weightless in their arms. As they moved towards the door, David's sharp eyes caught sight of Diana, who was standing, pale and trembling, her hand still pressed against the locket at her throat. He saw the object of his employer's distress. For a fleeting moment, his professional gaze lingered on the weeping willow design before he turned his focus back to Catherine. The black Bentley sped silently through the city streets, a stark contrast to the blaring chaos of an ambulance. Inside, Catherine was beginning to stir on the plush leather seat, moaning softly. Dr. Matthews, her private physician, was waiting at the entrance to her palatial penthouse apartment, and within minutes she was resting in her own bed, an IV drip replenishing her fluids. "It was the shock, Catherine," Dr. Matthews said gently. "Your heart is strong, but a shock of that magnitude. What on earth happened in that place?" Catherine waved a dismissive hand, her eyes still closed. "Leave us, Robert. I need to speak with David." When the doctor had gone, David stood by her bedside, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Sterling," he began, "perhaps these visits to the diner are becoming too much." "It wasn't the diner, David," she interrupted, her voice gaining strength. She pushed herself up against the silk pillows. "It was the girl, the waitress. She was wearing Isabella's locket." David's stoicism finally cracked. His eyebrows shot up. "Are you certain it could be a replica, a coincidence?" "There are no replicas," Catherine stated, her voice hardening with conviction. "I designed it myself with Jean-Pierre Dubois in Paris. He swore to me the mold was destroyed, the way the third branch from the left curves under the fourth. It was a deliberate imperfection, a secret between my daughter and me. It was the locket, David." She swung her legs out of the bed, her earlier frailty replaced by a terrifying, renewed purpose. She walked to the window, gazing out at the sprawling city lights below a kingdom she had built on a foundation of grief. "50 years I've lived with the official story," she said, her back to him. "A tragic accident, a burnt-out car at the bottom of a ravine off Highway 1. They told me the fire was too intense to recover them." She choked on the last word. "But they never found the locket in the wreckage. I screamed at them to keep looking. They said it probably melted. I never believed it." She turned to face him, her blue eyes blazing with an almost manic light. "Find her, David. Find that girl. I want to know everything about her. Her name, her date of birth, who her parents were. Dig into her life. Use every resource we have. I don't care what it costs." "Of course, Mrs. Sterling," David said, already making mental notes. "But I must caution you. This could be a painful path to walk down for nothing. It could be a cruel trick." "It's the only path I have left," she whispered. Meanwhile, news of Catherine's public episode travelled fast in the Sterling family circles. A quick call from a concerned Dr. Matthews to Catherine's nephew, Harrison Sterling, was all it took. Harrison, the impeccably polished and ambitious CEO-in-waiting of Sterling Corp., was hosting a charity gala at the Museum of Modern Art when he got the news. He excused himself and took the call in a quiet alcove. "Fainted in a diner." Harrison said, his voice laced with a carefully curated concern that barely masked his irritation. "Is she all right?" "She's resting now," the doctor assured him. "But Harrison, she was talking about Isabella again. She seemed to think she saw someone, or something, that belonged to her." A cold knot tightened in Harrison's stomach. His entire life had been built in the shadow of the sainted, deceased Isabella. He had been groomed since birth to be the sole heir, the one to carry the Sterling mantle. His aunt's grief was the bedrock of his future inheritance. Any crack in that foundation was a threat. "Thank you for letting me know, Robert," Harrison said smoothly. "I'll be over to check on her first thing in the morning. Please make sure she gets her rest. She can be fragile when it comes to this subject." Hanging up, Harrison stared at his reflection in the dark glass of the museum window. The charming, philanthropic smile he wore for the public was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating hardness. A waitress, a locket. It was probably nothing. Some delusion brought on by grief and old age. But Harrison Sterling didn't believe in leaving things to chance. He had worked too hard and waited too long to let a ghost from the past or some conniving girl in a diner jeopardize his future. He made a call of his own to a man who specialized in a different kind of research than David Chen, a man who operated in the shadows. "I have a name for you to find," Harrison said, his voice low and dangerous. "A waitress at a place called the Morning Glory Diner. I want to know who she is, what she wants, and why my aunt collapsed at the sight of her." 2 days later, Diana was scrubbing a stubborn ketchup stain off the diner counter when the bell above the door chimed. A man in a dark suit walked in. It was the same man from the other day, the one who had whisked the old woman away. His presence immediately put the entire diner on edge. He wasn't a customer. He was an envoy from another world. He walked directly to Diana. "Miss Diana Reed?" he asked. His voice was polite, but his eyes were analytical, missing nothing. Diana's heart hammered against her ribs. "Yes." "My name is David Chen. I am the personal assistant to Mrs. Catherine Sterling, the woman who was taken ill the other day." He paused. Mrs. Sterling feels deeply apologetic for the scene she caused. She was overcome by a memory. "She has asked to see you." "See me why?" Diana asked, her suspicion palpable. She would like to apologize in person, and to make amends for any distress she may have caused you. David explained, his face a perfect mask of professional courtesy. "She has sent me to bring you to her. You will be compensated for your lost wages, of course." Sal, the owner, who had been listening from the grill, wiped his hands on his apron and stepped forward. "My girl ain't going anywhere she don't want to go." "It is merely an invitation," David said calmly. "But I must tell you, Mrs. Sterling can be very persuasive." Diana thought about her overdue bills, the landlord's threatening notes. Curiosity warred with fear. What did this fantastically wealthy woman want with her? It had to be about the locket. Maybe she wanted to buy it. Diana's hand instinctively went to her chest. She could never sell it, but the thought of a reward, of a way out of her crushing debt, was a powerful lure. "Okay," Diana heard herself say. "I'll go." The ride in the Bentley was like entering another dimension. The city's noise disappeared behind soundproof glass. The scent of worn vinyl was replaced by the rich aroma of polished wood and fine leather. They pulled up to one of the most exclusive buildings on Park Avenue, a place Diana had only ever seen in magazines. The penthouse was a sprawling expanse of glass and minimalist art, with a view that seemed to encompass all of Manhattan. Catherine Sterling was waiting for her in a sitting room, dressed not in a power suit, but in a soft cashmere sweater. She looked older, more vulnerable than she had in the diner. "Miss Reed," Catherine said, her voice gentle. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." Diana sat stiffly on the edge of a white sofa that probably cost more than her car. "I owe you a profound apology," Catherine began. "My behavior was inexcusable. You see, the locket you wear is identical to one I gave my daughter many, many years ago." Seeing it so unexpectedly, it brought back a flood of painful memories. "I'm sorry for your loss," Diana murmured, unsure of what else to say. "Thank you." Catherine looked at her, her gaze intense. "You told me it was your mother's. May I ask, what was her name?" Sarah Reed." Diana replied. "She died when I was a baby." Catherine's face betrayed a flicker of disappointment. The name meant nothing to her. "Isabella. Her daughter was Isabella." But she pressed on. "Miss Reed. Diana. I find myself in a peculiar position. I was very taken with your composure and grace under pressure in the diner. I am looking for a personal companion, someone to assist me with daily tasks, reading appointments. The work would not be strenuous, and the compensation would be substantial." Diana stared at her stunned. A job, "Ma'am, I'm a waitress. I don't have any qualifications. You have kindness in your eyes and a strength you might not recognize in yourself." "That is all the qualification I require," Catherine said. "I would offer you a salary of $200,000 a year, plus accommodations here in a guest suite." Diana's mind reeled. $200,000. It was an astronomical, life-altering sum. It was a trap. It had to be. This wasn't about a job. This was about the locket. The old woman was obsessed, and she was trying to buy her way into Diana's life to get it. "Why are you doing this?" Diana asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Let's be honest with each other," Catherine said, leaning forward. "I am a lonely old woman haunted by her past. You are a young woman with a difficult present. Perhaps we can help each other. I will not ask you about the locket again. I simply wish to have you in my life. Consider it the whim of an eccentric billionaire." The offer was too good to refuse. It was a golden key, a chance to escape the relentless grind of poverty. With a heavy dose of skepticism, Diana accepted. Her first week was a dizzying blur. She moved into a suite of rooms, larger than her entire apartment building floor. She was given a wardrobe of new clothes and a debit card with a balance that made her feel faint. Her duties were simple, just as Catherine had promised, reading the newspaper aloud, organizing correspondence, accompanying her to quiet lunches. Catherine was kind, patient, and treated her with a grandmotherly affection that was both comforting and unsettling. She never mentioned the locket, but Diana could feel its presence between them, an unspoken question hanging in the opulent air. It was during that first week that she met Harrison Sterling. He arrived at the penthouse unannounced, a vision of tailored perfection and easy charm. "So you're the one," he said, smiling broadly at Diana. "The talk of the town. My aunt hasn't stopped singing your praises." He took her hand. "Harrison Sterling. It's a pleasure to meet you." His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Later that day, he found Diana alone in the library arranging books. "I hope you'll forgive me for being direct," he said, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. "I care about my aunt a great deal. She's a brilliant woman, but she has vulnerabilities, especially concerning her daughter." "She told me about the locket," Diana said. "Ah, yes, the locket." Harrison sighed, running a hand through his perfect hair. "Diana, you seem like a smart, sensible young woman. I feel I should warn you. My aunt, she sometimes gets fixated. She sees ghosts where there are none. In her grief, she projects her hopes onto people. She did it a few years ago with a young art curator who had eyes like my cousin Isabella. It ended unpleasantly for the girl when Catherine realized she wasn't who she wanted her to be." He let the words hang in the air. "She's offering you a fantasy, a gilded cage. But when the fantasy fades, the cage door slams shut. I just don't want to see a nice girl like you get hurt." He gave her a sympathetic smile and left, leaving a trail of poison in his wake. Diana stood frozen, the book in her hand, feeling heavy as lead. Was that what this was? Was she just the latest in a line of replacement granddaughters? Harrison's warning felt chillingly plausible. The kindness, the money, the sudden intense interest in her. It all clicked into place as a manipulative fantasy. Doubt, cold and sharp, pierced through the fragile hope that had begun to bloom in her heart. She looked down at the locket beneath her shirt. For the first time, it didn't feel like a comfort. It felt like a liability. Harrison's words festered in Diana's mind, coloring every interaction with Catherine. The old woman's kindness now seemed tinged with obsession. Her sad gazes felt like evaluations. Was she comparing Diana to the ghost of Isabella the penthouse, once a symbol of miraculous escape, began to feel like the gilded cage Harrison had described. Yet Diana couldn't bring herself to leave. The financial security was a powerful anesthetic for her anxiety. Driven by a desperate need for the truth, Diana began her own quiet investigation. During the afternoons when Catherine napped, she would use the high-speed internet in the penthouse library, a tool she'd never had reliable access to before. She typed Isabella Sterling into the search bar. The results were sparse, befitting a tragedy from the pre-internet era. A few archived articles from the 1970s. They all told the same story: Isabella Sterling, 19. Brilliant and rebellious daughter of pharmaceutical magnate Catherine Sterling, eloped with a musician named Daniel Peterson. Months later, both were tragically killed when their car veered off a coastal road in Northern California. The article mentioned they were believed to have been traveling with their infant child, whose body was also never recovered from the inferno. Diana's blood ran cold. Infant child. The dates matched. It was a long shot, a crazy coincidence, but the seed of a wild, impossible idea was planted. She tried to find more about Daniel Peterson, but he was a ghost, a footnote in a rich girl's tragic story. She hit a wall. The public record was sealed by time and the Sterling family's influence. Unbeknownst to Diana, Catherine was conducting a far more powerful investigation. David had hired Robert Finch, a legendary private investigator. Finch was a former FBI agent, a man who found needles in continents, not just haystacks. He worked out of a discreet office in a downtown skyscraper, surrounded by secure servers and soundproof walls. The official report is clean, almost too clean, Finch told Catherine and David over a secure video call. He brought a grainy police photo up on the screen. It showed the blackened skeletal remains of a car at the bottom of a ravine. Coroner's report states death by trauma and subsequent incineration. The fire was attributed to a ruptured gas tank. Case closed. "What do you see, Robert?" Catherine asked, her voice taut. "I see what's not there," Finch replied. "I pulled the original case files. The first officer on the scene, a rookie named Miller, his initial report mentions a chemical smell, not just gasoline. That note is absent from the final typed report signed by the chief of police. I also ran a search on that chief, a man named Frank O'Malley. Turns out a year after the accident, he retired and bought a 40-foot yacht, a bit rich for a small-town police chief's salary." David leaned forward. "A cover-up. Or just shoddy police work and a lucky retirement," Finch said cautiously. "But there's more. The car was a 1973 Ford Pinto, notorious for its gas tank design flaw, yes. But the fire damage described by the ME suggests an accelerant was used. The heat was so intense it warped the engine block, something a simple gasoline fire rarely does. It's almost as if someone wanted to make absolutely sure nothing was left to identify." Catherine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "What about the bodies?" "That's the most interesting part," Finch said, his tone grim. "They were identified through dental records. Daniel Peterson's records were flown in from his hometown in Ohio. But Isabella's, they used the records from her childhood dentist in New York. The ME noted that the jawbone was severely fragmented, but he made a positive ID based on a couple of molars with distinctive fillings. "Get those records," Catherine commanded, "and find that rookie cop, Miller. Find O'Malley's financials. I want to know where the money for that yacht came from." Finch's investigation continued. He located the former officer Miller, now a grizzled old man living in a retirement community in Arizona. After some persuasion and a guarantee of anonymity, Miller talked. "Yeah, I remember that crash." he said, his voice raspy over the phone. Spooked me good. The smell was weird, like turpentine. I told Chief O'Malley, and he told me I was a rookie with an overactive imagination, and that I should write what he told me to write. The next day, 2 guys in expensive suits showed up. Never saw them before, never saw them again. They talked to the chief for an hour, and after that, the case was wrapped up tighter than a drum. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture that was far more sinister than a simple accident. Someone hadn't just died. Someone had been erased. At the same time, Harrison was getting updates from his own source. His investigator, a less scrupulous man who dealt in blackmail and digital espionage, had hacked into Diana's old social media accounts and talked to people from her last foster home. The report was simple. Subject is exactly as she appears. Orphan broke no connections. The Lockett story is consistent. She's a nobody. This should have placated Harrison, but his aunt's hiring of Robert Finch, a man whose reputation preceded him, set off alarm bells. Why hire a shark like Finch to investigate a 50-year-old open and shut case, unless Catherine truly believed the girl was who she thought she was? The threat wasn't that Diana was a con artist. The threat was that she was real. Harrison decided he had to escalate his plan. He couldn't let Finch uncover a truth that would cost him everything. He needed to discredit Diana so completely that whatever Finch found would be dismissed as irrelevant. He arranged for his investigator to fabricate a paper trail, fake emails, doctored bank statements, suggesting Diana had been researching the Sterling family tragedy for months, that she had purchased a replica locket online, that this whole encounter was a meticulously planned grift. He was no longer just sowing doubt. He was preparing to destroy an innocent girl's life to protect his own. The tension in the penthouse had become a palpable thing. Catherine was consumed by Finch's investigation, spending hours on the phone with him and David, her hope warring with a lifetime of grief. Diana, feeling the chill of Harrison's warning and Catherine's preoccupied distance, grew more isolated and confused than ever. She was living in a palace, yet she felt like a prisoner awaiting a verdict. Harrison chose his moment perfectly. He knew Catherine had a board meeting that would last all morning. He arrived at the penthouse under the pretense of dropping off some documents, finding Diana alone in the grand living room staring out at the city. "Diana," he said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "You look troubled. Is everything all right?" "I'm fine," she said, not turning to look at him. "Are you because I'm not? I've been doing some digging of my own for my aunt's protection," he said, stepping closer. He placed a sleek leather portfolio on the glass coffee table. "I think you need to see this." He opened it. Inside were printouts of emails. They looked like they were from Diana to an old friend discussing her plan. Found a perfect mark, this rich old lady obsessed with her dead daughter. "I even found a place that makes replica lockets. Just have to play the part right, and I'll be set for life." There were also bank statements showing a large payment to a custom jewelry website and search histories for Isabella Sterling and Catherine Sterling net worth, dated months before she ever met Catherine. It was all fake, a masterpiece of digital forgery, but to Diana it was devastating. This isn't real," she stammered, her face draining of color. "I've never seen any of this. I would never." "Wouldn't you?" Harrison's voice turned cold, his charming facade melting away to reveal the predator beneath. "A poor orphan girl sees a chance to scam a billionaire. It's the oldest story in the book. I have to hand it to you. The locket was a brilliant touch. You almost had her. You almost had us all." "No, you're lying," Diana cried, tears of panic and rage springing to her eyes. "Why are you doing this? I'm protecting my family from a greedy little grifter," he sneered. "And now I'm giving you a choice. You can walk out of here today with $100,000, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and disappear forever. Or you can stay, and I will give this portfolio to the police and the press. Your face will be on every tabloid. Orphan scams grieving billionaire. You'll be ruined. No one will ever believe you." It was a perfect checkmate. Her word against his, backed by a mountain of fabricated evidence. Despair washed over her. He was right. No one would believe her. "What do you say, Diana?" Harrison pressed a cruel smirk on his face. "She says nothing to you, Harrison." The voice cold as ice came from the doorway. Catherine Sterling stood there, her board meeting, evidently finished early. David was right behind her, his expression grim. She had heard everything. Harrison was momentarily stunned, his face paling. "Aunt Catherine, I know exactly what you were doing," she said, her voice trembling with a fury Diana had never seen. She walked slowly into the room, her eyes locked on her nephew. "For years I have tolerated your ambition, your greed. I mistook it for a desire to uphold the Sterling name. But this, to prey on this girl, to fabricate such disgusting lies. They're not lies," Harrison blustered, trying to regain control. "She's manipulating you. Can't you see it? The only manipulator I see here is you," Catherine shot back. She turned to Diana, her expression softening. "I am so sorry, my dear. I am so sorry I let him near you." She then looked back at Harrison. "David, call security. Have my nephew escorted from the building. He is no longer an officer of Sterling Corp, and he is no longer welcome in my home. His access to all company and family accounts is to be revoked effective immediately." "You can't do this." Harrison roared, his composure finally shattering. "I am your heir. I have given my life to your company." "My company was built to save lives, not to ruin them," Catherine said quietly. "You are not the man I thought you were." As security guards arrived to escort a protesting defeated Harrison out of the penthouse, Catherine sank onto the sofa, looking utterly drained. The confrontation had taken its toll. She turned to Diana, her eyes filled with a deep, bottomless sorrow. "He was right about one thing," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I have been projecting my hopes onto you, but not in the way he meant." She took a deep breath. "Diana, there is something I must tell you. For 50 years I believed my daughter died in a car accident. But now I don't think it was an accident at all. I think she ran away. She ran away from me." Catherine's confession was halting, filled with the pain of decades of regret. She told Diana about the fight, the last one she ever had with Isabella. It was about Daniel Peterson, the musician. Catherine had threatened to disinherit her, to cut her off completely if she married him. "She told me I cared more about my money than her happiness." Catherine wept. "She said she would rather live in poverty with someone she loved than in a palace with a mother who tried to control her. The last words I ever said to my own child were cruel and unforgiving. The next thing I knew, the police were at my door." The puzzle pieces in Diana's mind began to shift, forming a new, terrifying picture. Her mother, Sarah Reed, who had died of a sudden illness when Diana was 3, had been a musician. She'd been fiercely independent, secretive about her past, and had always seemed to be running from something. And she had a locket with a weeping willow. Catherine looked at Diana, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I believe the accident was staged, a way for Isabella and her husband to disappear to escape me. And if they disappeared, and they had a child who would be your age now." She didn't have to finish the sentence. The impossible, insane idea that had been a tiny seed in Diana's mind exploded into a universe of possibility. She wasn't an orphan. She wasn't a nobody. She might be a sterling. But if that were true, her entire life had been predicated on a desperate, heartbreaking lie. The revelation hung in the air of the penthouse, vast and terrifying. Catherine's theory was audacious, a desperate leap of faith, but it resonated with a strange and powerful truth within Diana. The secrecy surrounding her own mother, the constant sense of being unmoored, it all began to make a fractured kind of sense. While Catherine and Diana were reeling from the emotional fallout, Robert Finch delivered his final explosive report. "We found him," Finch said, via a secure link, his face impassive as ever. "The rookie cop, Miller's man in a suit." We cross-referenced financial records and old photographs. The man who visited Chief O'Malley was a known fixer for the Blackwood family. "Blackwood?" Catherine asked, confused. "What do they have to do with this Daniel Peterson, the musician your daughter eloped with? That wasn't his real name. He was born Daniel Blackwood. His father was Alistair Blackwood, the shipping tycoon. Your rival." The blow was so staggering, Catherine had to physically sit down. Alistair Blackwood was her fiercest competitor in the 1970s, a ruthless businessman she had despised. "Daniel had a falling out with his father," Finch continued. "He wanted to be a musician, wanted no part of the family business. Alistair disowned him. It appears Alistair learned of his son's marriage to your daughter Isabella. He couldn't stand the thought of his son, a Blackwood, living in supposed poverty, while his wife was heir to the sterling fortune. But he also couldn't stomach a public union between the two families, so he offered them a way out. He would fund their disappearance, give them new identities, and set them up with a trust fund on one condition: they were to be declared dead. They were never to contact their families again. It was a cold, cruel corporate solution to a human problem. Alistair Blackwood had orchestrated the entire thing: the accident, the payoffs, the falsified records to control a narrative and erase an inconvenient alliance. He had allowed Catherine to grieve for 50 years out of pure, spiteful pride. "Where are they?" Catherine whispered, her voice hoarse. Finch's expression softened for the first time. "Alistair Blackwood died 15 years ago. We managed to access his private records. The trust he set up for them was active for 20 years. It paid out to a Sarah and a David Peterson. The payment stopped around 25 years ago. We found a death certificate for a David Peterson matching Daniel's age and description. Cause of death was a climbing accident. And then, a few years after that, a certificate for Sarah Peterson, formerly Reed. Cause of death was a brain aneurysm. She passed away in a small town in Oregon. The air left Catherine's lungs. The flicker of hope that Isabella was still alive was extinguished. She had been. She had been alive all that time, living under a new name, and now she was gone again, this time for good. But the report wasn't finished. "Sarah Peterson had one child," Finch said quietly. "A daughter, born 50 years ago. After her mother's death, she was placed into the state's foster care system. Her name is Diana Reed." Silence. The confirmation was absolute, devastating, and strangely peaceful. It was true, all of it. Diana, who had been listening to the entire call on speakerphone, felt a dizzying wave of vertigo. Her entire identity had just been rewritten. Her mother wasn't just Sarah Reed. She was Isabella Sterling Blackwood, a woman who had fled 2 empires for love, only to die young and alone. Tears streamed down Diana's face, for the mother she never knew, for the father she'd never even heard of, for the grandmother who had been searching for her all along. In the midst of the emotional storm, her hand went as it always did to the locket. It was the only thing that felt real. Her fingers traced the familiar grooves of the weeping willow. She'd twisted it, pulled it, and pried at it her whole life, with no success. But now, her fingers trembling with the weight of this new reality, she felt something she'd never felt before. A tiny, almost imperceptible seam along the curved edge of the locket, hidden within the engraved branches. Her fingernail found the edge. With a surge of adrenaline, she pushed. There was a faint click. The face of the locket sprang open. Catherine gasped. For 50 years, even she had not known this secret. The locket had a false front. Inside it was not what she expected. There was no miniature portrait of Isabella or Daniel. Instead, nestled in the tiny hollow, was a minuscule piece of paper, folded into a tight, dense square, no bigger than a sugar cube. It was yellowed with age, the creases sharp and permanent. With trembling hands that felt clumsy and foreign, Diana carefully unfolded the paper. It was a letter, the ink faded, but still legible, written in a delicate, elegant script. It began, "My dearest Diana, if you are reading this, it means the world has turned in a way I both hoped for and feared. It likely means you have met your grandmother, Catherine, and it means that I am gone. There is so much I need to explain. My name was Isabella. Your father's name was Daniel. We loved each other more than we feared the powerful worlds we came from. My mother, your grandmother, tried to control my life with her money. Your father's father tried to erase his identity. So we chose to erase ourselves instead. We chose a life of freedom, a life with you. It was not a perfect life, but it was ours. Your father was the kindest man I ever knew, and he would have adored you. After he died, I was so lost. I tried to be strong for you. I wanted to give you a normal life, away from the lies and the power plays. But I was always afraid. Afraid that our past would catch up to us. Afraid for your safety. I raised you as Diana Reed, a girl with no history, because I thought it would protect you. I am writing this because I feel my time is short. This illness, it's moving fast. If I am gone, this locket is your key. Do not show this letter to Catherine unless you see in her eyes not a magnate, but a mother. If you see regret, if you see that she has learned that love is more precious than any fortune, then give this to her. It is her chance at redemption, and yours at a future I could never provide. Know this, my sweet girl running away was not a rejection of my mother. It was a rejection of the world she built around herself. In my heart, I never stopped loving her, and I have loved you every second of every day. Be brave. Be kind. You are the best parts of both of us. Forever your mother, Isabella Sarah. Diana finished reading the letter aloud, her voice thick with tears. The small piece of paper held between her fingers felt heavier than the entire sterling fortune. It was a testament, a confession, and a bridge across 50 years of silence and pain. She looked up at Catherine. The old woman was utterly still, her face a mask of profound, heart-wrenching sorrow. The tears that fell from her eyes were silent, carrying the weight of a lifetime of misunderstanding. Isabella had not hated her. That was the absolution she had craved for 5 decades. Her daughter had loved her even in exile. She forgave me. Catherine whispered the words, catching in her throat. She wanted you to earn it, Diana said softly, holding out the letter. Catherine took the fragile paper as if it were a sacred relic. Her fingers, which had signed billion-dollar contracts and shaken hands with world leaders, trembled as she traced her daughter's handwriting. She read the letter again to herself, her lips moving, silently absorbing every word. This small note was more valuable to her than her entire empire. It was proof of love, proof of loss, and finally proof of a connection to the girl standing before her. In that moment, the last wall between them crumbled. Catherine wasn't a billionaire, and Diana wasn't a waitress. They were a grandmother and a granddaughter, united by a shared love for the woman who had brought them together and torn them apart. Catherine reached out and pulled Diana into a fierce, desperate hug. It was not the tentative, polite embrace of a stranger, but the raw, clinging grasp of family finally found. They wept together for Isabella, for Daniel, for the lost years, and for the difficult, beautiful future that lay ahead. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Harrison Sterling was formally and publicly disowned. The fabricated evidence he created was turned over to the authorities by Finch, and he faced charges of perjury and conspiracy to defraud. His fall from grace was spectacular and brutal, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms across the world. The news of Diana Reid being the long-lost granddaughter of Catherine Sterling and the secret heir to 2 fortunes became a global media sensation. Reporters camped outside the Park Avenue building. Offers for interviews, books and movies poured in. But Catherine and Diana ignored it all. They retreated into the quiet of the penthouse, their own private island, in a sea of public speculation. They spent their days not talking about money or business, but about Isabella. Diana shared the few faded memories she had of a laughing woman who played the guitar and smelled of lavender. Catherine shared stories of a rebellious, brilliant young girl who loved to paint and argue about philosophy. Together they pieced together the mosaic of the woman they had both lost. One crisp autumn evening, as they sat on the terrace overlooking the glittering city, Catherine turned to Diana. "Your mother wanted you to have a future she couldn't provide," Catherine said. "And your father walked away from an empire for the freedom to be himself. This fortune, it can be a cage or it can be a tool. It's up to us." Diana knew what she had to do. "I don't want to run a pharmaceutical company," she said, "but I want to honor them, both of them." And so the Sterling Blackwood Foundation was born. It was an audacious new venture, funded with a significant portion of both family fortunes. Its mission was twofold: to provide grants and support for struggling artists and musicians, giving them the freedom Daniel had craved, and to create safe houses and support systems for young single mothers who felt trapped, offering them the safety Isabella had sought. Diana became the face and the heart of the foundation. She threw herself into the work, finding a purpose that felt more real and vital than any inheritance. She was no longer Diana Reid, the poor waitress, or Diana Sterling, the billionaire heiress. She was Isabella's daughter, and she was building a legacy of hope on a foundation of healed scars. Catherine, for her part, found a peace she never thought possible. She stepped back from her company, leaving it in the hands of a trusted board. Her new role was to be a grandmother. She taught Diana about her history, about her family, and in turn, Diana taught her about forgiveness, resilience, and the simple joy of sharing a quiet meal, no different from the one in the Morning Glory diner, where their story had finally truly begun. The locket its secret revealed was now kept in a small velvet box, a reminder not of what was lost, but of what, against all odds, had been found. The story of Diana and Catherine is a powerful reminder that the most valuable heirlooms we possess are not made of gold or silver, but of truth and love. It shows us that family is a bond that can endure decades of silence, overcome unthinkable lies, and heal the deepest of wounds. Their journey from a greasy spoon diner to a shared destiny of healing teaches us that it's never too late to find where you belong and that true wealth is measured not by what you own, but by the lives you touch and the love you share. If this story of lost discovery and redemption moved you, please take a moment to hit that like button. It truly helps our channel grow. Share this video with someone who appreciates a story with a heart, and most importantly, subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story that explores the incredible hidden dramas of everyday life. Thank you for listening.